Esdale Davis. I'm 103 and a half years old. Born in Brisbane, Queensland. A lovely, wealthy family. Spoilt little boy as a child. With a mother was marvellous. My mother was Australian champion soprano with 101 marks, better than 100%. And a man came over to sponsor General Motors and sponsored the cars here because it was all horse and buggies these days. He was from General Motors in America, and he'd heard my mother, and he said, "You should come to America." And he sent, when he opened General Motors here. So in those days, because it was all dirt roads, horses drawn, this was the start of cars in Australia. So he invited my mother to go to America, and when she got there, it was comic opera and Shear's grand opera. She wouldn't have a bar to it. But eventually she met Gattaca Zazzy, the manager of the Metropolitan Opera House in America, where they picked the world's best singers. And she was put on staff there to learn to be an actress. And then she appeared in the chorus there with Caruso, world's famous opera singer. She returned to Australia only because her mother was missing her and was getting sick, announcing to the reporters on the ship when she arrived that she's only coming here for a short time and going back. But she met my father, and this was about 1913, and married him, and the war started, and she never went back to America. Yeah. They put entertainment of a show called The Stenographer Girl on air, and this money was all to go to help the war effort. So she never returned to America, and she got married and had my sister and I. So I was born way back in 1921. These were days where it was all mostly horse-drawn vehicles. And things were very, very quiet in here. Nothing like it is now. Most people had chooks in their backyards, some with roosters. Mostly people could exist with their own gardens. There was no Woolworths or Coles, nothing like that. There was no cars being stolen by kids because to own a car, you had to pay cash. There was no hire purchase. It hadn't started. So things were much better. There was no radio. If you get a radio, you'd have to make it yourself. And we got a radio made by the manager of Leyland Motors. He was quite expert, and he got books from America and made a radio for us. We were about, you couldn't buy radios, but it was not much. You know, it was not broadcasting in Brisbane anyway. The only broadcasting that already started was in Sydney. And with your radios, you're flat out as radios of hearing what was on in Sydney. Yeah. So things were so much better then. Every night you left your money out on your doorstep for the milkman to come, and he would leave the milk there or come into your house and pour it into a jug. They're so honest that all the suburbs right through, the money every night left on doorsteps, nobody stole. Nobody ever locked a door. You didn't close a window. Everything was so honest. Well, firstly, I went to a convent. There, it was all run by nuns. Now, the nuns actually was teaching the Roman Catholic kids all about the devil. They didn't know anything about Jesus, but they only knew about the devil. And so they all became Roman Catholics, became terrified of the devil. My sister and I weren't a Catholic. So when they went into the church, we could go into the church too. We learned to bless ourselves with holy water and walk down the aisle and bow in front of the altar before we sat down, and then walk out backwards in front of the altar and walk out backwards, because they told us up in the cow of the church, the devil was there with his fork, and he took his fork at you. And God was there with a big book recording any naughty thing you did. So we didn't become Roman Catholics, and we weren't terrorized. Once you became a Roman Catholic, you're terrorized for the rest of your life over that religion. So my father found out because land near our place, Cowlishore Estate, he was worried about people walking across the front of his grounds. So the nuns said, the devil is hiding in that ground there. So my sister and I going home, when we got to the edge of the ground, we'd run like mad because we didn't want the devil to get us. And in the morning when I woke up that morning, I didn't want to go to school. I was too terrified. My mother told me about the devil there. So my father heard about this. They took me away from that school altogether. And I went to Ascot. Ascot School was a good school. It was pretty famous that moment. We saw when Hitler arrived, Hitler came to us and gave us a talk. We had a day off. Kingsford Smith arrived. Kingsford Smith came to us and gave us a talk. Everyone famous could talk at Ascot School. So it was the school for wealthy kids. So much so, though, that's how they were in those days, they started a uniform, Ascot School uniform. And all the kids on parade in the morning had to wear the uniform. If they didn't wear the uniform, they got the cane. They were caned because their parents were too poor to buy a uniform. Yet the kids had to suffer for it. So the kids all wore the uniform of Ascot School. Cruelty was important in those days, much more important. Everything could be cruel. I could be called and caned every day for misspelling a word. Just couldn't spell a word. They'd write it up on the blackboard and push my head against it. So I, blinded with tears, would learn how to spell. That was the stupidity of the teachers they had. We never complained to our parents because we only knew about punishment. And we thought this is all natural. So much so for embarrassment that one of the teachers, I'd said nothing wrong, I'd spelled something wrong, get on the desk, bend over and point. Well, he whacked my bottom hard. He was actually probably a pedophile, and he was enjoying it, whacking my bottom. Things were so different there. But much more the honesty was spread over the land. I left school as soon as I could at 14, and I just couldn't get a job anyway. But there was a job advertised by chartered accountants, and about 100 kids went to ask to go there. I was the last to get there. But my mother knew the director of that firm and rang him, and I got the job. So I became an office boy of chartered accountants. They wanted to be an accountant. I didn't want to be an accountant. I wanted to be a traveller, a commercial traveller. So eventually, after 3 years at that school, working for that firm, they insisted, are you going to stay on here and become an accountant? And I said, no. Well, we have to leave you. 17, you're too old to be an office boy. So I got left there. Yeah. So I was unemployed for a while, and then I went to an unemployed school for young men between 18 and 25, run by the government. You know what they taught? Accountancy. So I learned to type, learned to do shorthand, and learned accountancy and commercial law. So I was stuck anyway. But then war started. Every person in that college joined up, including me. Yeah. You know, in the Navy, I didn't like the rough uniform. It was Navy Air Force. I played a cornet. I learned from school, so I played in the Navy band. And the shock of having to play a cornet while marching was much more difficult than just sitting there playing it. But I kept doing that. But I didn't like the Navy uniform, and everything was Nelson's rule. To join the Navy, they had a big rope. You had to climb right to the top of it and back again, because they were still used to people climbing out on the masts of the sailing ships. So I eventually left the Navy and then joined the Air Force. So then I went to Amberley to join my rookies in the Air Force. And graduate, you know, it's pretty awful. We're all given World War I rifles, very rusted old rifles. And the weekend, on the Friday, on the weekend, on parade, we all had bayonets, Parsons bayonets with a click. And they went click, and one went click later. They tried it again, Parsons bayonets. Mine click later. It was rusty old, but that didn't matter. I was given weekend work and not left on leave. So I, instead of going on leave, cleaning the hospital. Till the nurses, I was cleaning in the toilets. The nurse came, she wanted to go to the toilet. I'm still there cleaning. They gave me leave. I came over. Yeah. The sergeant one day, when I was training, said to me, Esdale, I believe you want to be a pilot. Yes, sir, I want to be a pilot. Well, follow me. And we went around and see those room here? See all those bricks? You can pilot here and pilot there. It was reverse psychology in the Air Force. When I graduated from my training, they asked me, where do you want to go? And I said, I want to go overseas. Right. They sent me to Brisbane. We didn't understand Air Force reverse psychology. when eventually, after several years, when I was posted in the northeastern area, they asked me, our unit's moving overseas and you've done your time in the northeastern area. You can leave now and go back to Brisbane. Do you want to do that? I said, yes, right. I went overseas. Everything was quite different. I didn't like my name as Esdale, and someone said to me, "You're Diesel." So I became Diesel Davis. So DD, which is Defence Department, on marked and everything, was mine. Yeah, we went to the Trobriand Islands. Yeah. I was in no condition to do that. I had dengue fever and hardly recovered from dengue fever. Now, we were all sitting in an Air Force big truck, covered truck, on the long bridge, one-way bridge. And as we were going along, the Americans are coming in their truck on the opposite side. It's a one-way bridge, no room for two to pass. The Americans wouldn't move, and we wouldn't move. So we crashed side on, and the truck went on the side like this and tipped back. My mate and I got injured on my back. So we were taken to the Army hospital, and I was treated for my back wounds, and he and I were sitting there, and we overheard him saying, discussing admitting us. They didn't know who we were, but anyway, we were for us. So he and I sneaked out and walked into Charters Towers. I went to the picture show and I sat there, but not after, it must have been half hour, an hour after, it started to hit me. And I went next door to the police station, to the toilet there, and sat on the toilet until I was taken home again. Next morning I went down to the report to a hospital tent, only head of the hospital tent. No doctor, just a couple of orderlies, and my mate was in bed there. And I told them about it. No, don't worry about it. They just left me like that. So I had a shock and I hadn't got over it. Yeah. And that made it worse for me. So when we were loading the ship before we left at Townsville, I was getting seasick while they're loading the ship, and the ship's still there. My mother went to do pre-em leave before we went, and because I didn't eat anything, she suggested barley sugar. So on the ship, I was eating barley sugar only. It was an American ship, Floyd B. Olson. I reported to the American doctor on there. He said, "Oh, your stomach's all swollen up." He gave me a tablet, and after that, I was all right. I could eat again. Yeah. And we went to the Trobriand Islands, arriving there at night. Now, on the ship, because it couldn't go close, there was a floating dock, and the ship was on a floating dock, still in the ocean, and the ship would bump against the float and open up and bump against the and they put a rope ladder down the side, and with 2 kit bags and a rifle, we all climbed down there, right there, and when the floating dock hit, you jumped. If you didn't hit, you went between the ship and squashed. So we were so fit, we did that. Then we landed on the land at Trobriand Island, and there'd just been a raid, all the light, everything was complete darkness, and we're walking through the jungle, and there I learned if I fell over, my mates behind would walk over me and enjoy my making out of the mud over me. I learned I was completely on my own. If I survived, the only way would be me doing it. Nobody else would help. It's not like the army where you join with your mates. The Air Force were different. The Air Force, if you had made, they separated you. And it started because of the early parts of World War I. The pilots there graduated, brought in nice bed one day, the next day a new person, same bed. Life was only 1 or 2 days for a pilot in the Air Force, so no friendship was encouraged, and that's how it was when I joined. When I went into Archerfield, I saw for the first time the miracle Wirraway plane. Oh, it's a marvellous plane made in Australia. This was a big swindle by the government, because overseas already the planes there were advancing like mad, and we got this Wirraway, cheap, but nobody knew about this. And the Wirraway was called GP, General Purpose. It meant, if you want a fighter, Wirraway. Want a bomber? Wirraway. Anything, it's Wirraway. That's what we got. And so it had a pilot and observer. Yeah. Then also we got from America 3 Lockheed Hudson bombers. The Americans were well pleased to get rid of them, sell us cheap these things, because the Hudson had a machine gun in the nose and a turret on the back and a machine gun, a turret. Bomb bays underneath, top completely empty. A fighter plane could shoot from the top, shoot from underneath. It had to be attacked front and back. So they were absolutely useless against fighters. But still, this is how backward they were here. Australia, from the Melbourne service way back in Melbourne, had decided when Japan was coming down to New Guinea, the Japanese would fight in Queensland. Queensland would have a border, that's where the Japanese would fight. All the Southerners just sit back and smoke and watch the Queenslanders fighting. That's how silly they were. They also told us all the Japanese fighter pilots, little men with big glasses, hardly trained. The main man was trained to navigate. All the fighter planes followed him. If you shut him down, they'd all be confused, they wouldn't know what to do. All this propaganda to us, because we had no clues. When they bombed Darwin, they bombed it and bombed it and bombed it out there. No news ever filtered to the rest of Australia. Censorship was so good, they were frightened people would be panicking. Nobody ever was, the only one was some people from Darwin could come and talk to people, but that was it. In fact, censorship was so bad, you weren't even allowed to tell your mother or father where you were going or anything about your service. It was all just so secret. I was a technical librarian, which gave all the rules, etc., of running an Air Force. Yeah, things were quite tough in Kirrawena. I was quite happy to support black American servicemen. Black American servicemen were treated like nothing. They were pushed into the worst parts of the war. If it was very dangerous, they were sent in, while the whites sat back. In fact, in America, in Brisbane, over the Victoria Bridge separated the whites from the blacks. The blacks had to stay on that side of the bridge. And they they revolted one day and they're all marching into Brisbane, and the Americans set up a machine gun on the Victoria Bridge, machine gun them. They didn't get to Brisbane. So I feel sympathy for them. I was coming from a toilet in the Trobriand Islands, and there's two black American servicemen standing there, and I spoke to them, and they were so happy to have a white person to talk to them and be friendly. They become friendly to me. So every day in the afternoon, they would come on a truck and take me anywhere I wanted to go. So we'd go sometimes and we'd go out swimming. We all swam in the nude, nobody wore a costume. Or they took me one night, we sat under coconut trees, which was quite dangerous. The coconuts fall on you, hit your head and you knock you off. I sat there and I watched Casablanca. First time, a very great movie with Humphrey Bogart. Yeah. And also Bing Crosby's show about saying, I'm thinking of a white Christmas, just like the ones we used to know. Yeah. So I became great friends with these fellows. But eventually I had trouble. I was jumping out of a truck and as rocks, and I twisted my leg. So going to the tent was hard. Then lying in the tent, it's so hot, you'd leave it all open. But at midnight it would rain, and the rain was that thick you could cut holes out of it. And it would rain, and you'd close it, and it gets stifling hot. And I had a sandfly net. At night, islands, it's not pleasant like on the movies. So much noise, worse than the city, with the jungle, and creatures moving around the jungle. One night I woke up and there's a big rat on the other side of my tent, my sandfly net, and I threw him off. This big rat come to attack me. I got my bayonet. The rat decided he didn't want to attack me and he buzzed off again. But things were really, really unpleasant in the island here. We had a little trail work. 3 native girls come down and come to me, sitting on the toilet, and they say, American boy, Trobriand boy, small. American boy, this big. Australian boy, this big. I didn't want sex with him. There was 2 holes, so they buzzed off. We'd been told not to have sex with these lovely girls, which was pretty silly, but the padre told us not to, and I obeyed him. Working, I think it was about 4 hours off, 8 hours on, every day and night. 4 hours off and 8 hours on. And my job they gave me was sit there and while they unloading stuff, and while all Brisbane is blacked out, here it's a blaze of lights as they emptied gear that was taken off ships. And I had to sit there and glue my eyes in the dark, because if I saw a yellow light, I know Japanese planes were coming. A red light alerted them, they're almost there, and I had to tell them. And I was so tired, I hold my eyes open to keep it like. it was so hard. So eventually I had a breakdown, and I got to the point of I didn't know whether I was locked in a nightmare or awake. I couldn't tell which was which. And the padre saw me this way and immediately summoned me to go to the hospital. So they tracked me in a jeep to the hospital, and I'm trying to work out of this nightmare. Stop, stop, stop. I jumped out and threw myself on the ground. Didn't wake up. Took me to the hospital. So they sent me out to have my dinner. I started there. I threw everything down. Bang! Still not wake up. Went back to bed. And they must have drugged me. And a fellow came to my bed, and I thought, I'm dead. You're God. And I thought I was dead, and this was God. And I lay back to sleep. I recovered. After that, each day, I just sat down writing my experience until they decided to send me back to Australia. We got on one plane, and it landed at Goodenough Island, and two big American MPs brought in 3 little Japanese prisoners on the plane. And as the plane takes all these great American bullies to the Japanese, get your head down, get your head down. If they looked out, they would see palm trees, palm trees, palm trees. Silly Americans just bullying these Japanese. Anyway, I landed at the hospital in Milne Bay. I was brought in with a medical orderly to take me back to Australia. So we're stuck there, waiting for a ship to come to take us. He told me what you do. He was anxious we could fly back to Australia, not just wait there. Tell them that if you put on the ship, you'll jump overboard. So I did that, and next day I was on a plane to Australia. Yeah. We flew in this big Douglas aircraft, sitting in the back of the plane, and a great storm. The plane's flying over the storm, and it was so high, the fellows could put, the pilot and the observers could put masks on. He and I couldn't. We just were unconscious and didn't come back to consciousness as it landed in Townsville. Came out with a great headache. Then put in Townsville Hospital, and next day we went by plane to Brisbane, and I went to the Green Slopes War Memorial Hospital for servicemen. I was classed as a walking wounded, and they had all wounded there. They didn't need a walking wounded one, so they sent me to the Brisbane Hospital, which didn't know where to put me. They put me in Lowsome House with all the people who were insane. I was stuck in Nelson House for the whole weekend until I first saw a doctor. Then I was allowed out to come home and return every night after visiting hours. For a while I was like that. Shifted from Lowson House into the woods above with young people. Now here I am, young, suntanned, yellow from the yellow tablets, and eager, sexy nurses. they stripped me and lay me out, and the girls admire my body. And cheeky girls, one would get a syringe full of icy water, squirt it through the window, and then run for me to catch her. But I was no condition to be chasing girls. So eventually I was discharged from the hospital to RAF Command Group Hospital there, and they said to me, Esdale, do you want to be discharged or do you want to stay on? I said, I might as well be discharged. So they arranged for me to be discharged from the Air Force altogether. Actually, what happened was that we were losing the war while I was there, but when I was discharged, we started to win right away. So they were lucky not to have me anymore. I became acrophobic and couldn't gasp girls at all. I feel sick, which was a real problem. I finally got a job in taxation. Stacks and stacks of women there, and here I am. And no understanding while I flirt with the girls. No girl flirted with me. They were all fair dinkum. They don't flirt there like sharks, ready to bite you straight away. And I'd be flirting with a girl, and somehow she maneuvered me to ask her to take her out. And I was stuck with them. And after that, I was worry. How can I get out of this? So I stayed sick that day. I was to take her out. It took a long time before I got out of this feeling of being agoraphobic. I took one girl out long later, and in the pictures, I had to rush to the toilet, vomit, diarrhea, take a citric tablet, and sit back. She lived in Ipswich, and next day the same girl, because I hadn't done anything, she invited me to her home. When we got there, she took me to the park, and she lay back with her legs wide apart, lay there in the sunlight, cold, waiting for me. I sat back in the shade until she gave up waiting me, and then I went home. The girls I frustrated. Yeah. Another girl, I got a tyre repaired in her father's business, and she took me back to her home, and she showed me the car. She drove the car on the side, and there were all sorts of messes in the wheels. She wanted me to change the wheels, and I had no idea how to change the wheels. So she got some fella to do that. And then we went upstairs, and she said, will you go and get a bottle of milk, and I'm going to take a bath. So I went and got a bottle of milk put there, and she's in the bath waiting. Eventually she had to get out of the bath because I wasn't going in there to look after her. And her sister arrived with her boyfriend, and she introduced me. She said, look who I picked up. I was so angry that she picked me up. So after that, I went down to leave, and she still hurried down, hugged me, and tried to lay back on my back. I let her lay back, pushed her off my motorbike, and rode home. Yeah. I was not aware of girls at all. Actually, I'd gone to an all-boys school. From there, all Maine in the Air Force, we weren't used to girls at all. I had no idea of making a date with a girl or anything like that, even if I wanted to. It took me years and years before that changed. It changed with a little Irish girl, Pat O'Rourke. She was oversexed, and she changed me. Yeah. It took a long time. Yeah. They owned the Coronation Hotel, and they sold it for those days. I think it was £40,000. That Coronation Hotel they sold for. That was a lot of money way back in those days. £40,000 for that. That's the Coronation Hotel in Toowong, at the end of the Coronation Road. Yeah. Where all the university students go. I was actually filming for a group that was formed showing foreign films, because there's no foreign films in Brisbane at all. If you went to the, what to say, MGM, you went to Metro, you went to the RKO, Regent Theatre, Paramount, Winter Garden. They're all tied up. And so I was showing foreign films for people. We formed this group. It was backed by the communists. And we could show people for the first time wonderful foreign films. I would go and see the different consulates, each consulate in Brisbane, and get films from them free of charge to show. So I was showing those. And this night, I was showing them at a girl called Lang. Her uncle was the famous Lang that took people to Paraguay to form a new area. And that all broke down. He finally came back, and then he became Member of Parliament. She was his uncle. I was showing it was my birthday. I'd bought a new thing called a tape recorder, and I took this along and showing the films in her home. You know, Helen Collins, who actually was a music teacher, teaching music to all the students, people. She was invited me to show this film on my birthday at this girl Lang's home. And that's where I met both my wife and her girlfriend. But we met first, right? Helen Collins said, "Esdale, have you met Val and Margaret?" I said, "Yes, we haven't got to the kicking stage yet." That's how cheeky I was by that time. I was much more confident. So I finished, and the girl Lang said, "Esdale, I'm good at massage. You come here anytime you like. I give you a lovely massage." But I had met Val. I took her home, and we joined together from that time on. I'd let some street girls living in the home. I'd moved them in. I took Val down to show my home, and here's one there making love to an Australian soldier. So next day I told these girls, they weren't paying anything, they just were staying there. You had to buzz off. After that, I started to go with Val all the time, from that time on. Until Val eventually got pregnant and we had to get married. That's when I had first son, and we had 3 children, Mark, Peter, who's still alive, and Noel. Mark, as a teenager, started to drink. And I said, "Mark, if you keep drinking, you'll become an alcoholic." "Dad, I can give it up like that." 20 years later, he's going, He never properly ever gave it away. It ruined his kidneys and he died. In the same year, the youngest one had done what all the young people were doing those days, putting rings in their nose, rings in their ears. The girls put rings in their nipples, rings in any hole they could find, rings in their tongue. He and his mates got a chicken out the freezer and for hygiene and pricked the ear. Somehow he got this, I think what else call it, but it slowly rotted his life down. And he finished up in hospital waiting for a new kidney and put on the kidney ready. It never came. And that killed him eventually too. So I'm left now with Peter, the middle one, who's clever enough not to doing those things. My first wife got Parkinson. She was so very, very clever. And with Parkinson, she got to the point where she could even write or speak on the phone. That killed her. The second wife, Andriati, was great. But she got atrophy of the cerebellum, and bit by bit, that broke it down. That's when we finally came to Jeddah Gardens. And I was separated from her. Immediately, she went into Opal, and I went into the apartment here. But every morning, I'd get up at 7 o'clock, I'd get up, rush down, wake her up, comb her hair, and take her down, right down to the riverbank and back on a wheelchair. And then, because on Sundays, I would take her to church, I had breakfast with her each day. But eventually, one Sunday when I took her to church, when they're all going down for confirmation, she went to the toilet and just went everywhere. I had to clean her and clean the floor of the toilet. It took about half an hour to get it all so clean again. She never went back to church again. Yeah. That was 16 years ago. She died within 2 years of here. But I saved the money. For the first those 2 years, I would feed her, put her on the toilet, put her in a shower. They didn't have to do anything to her. But eventually, the head nurse, quite nasty, she and I never got on. And she said, Esdale, Andriati is starting to lean over. She'll put her hand in your wheelchair so you can't take her anymore on the wheelchair. That was an awful thing. So after that, they put her in this great big chair here that you couldn't get out of, and the cudioles would come and put a harness on you and lift you up and push you in the toilet and bring her back, and she should be dangling with her pants there, her bottom hard, properly not wiped. That was awful. She hated it, I hated it. She only lasted 2 years in that treatment and died. Yeah. It was very hard. I went up that last morning to see her, and she's choking. Can I get you something? My phone rang. A new girl had come to clean my house. Yeah. I said, Andriati, I'll have to leave you. And I had to leave and went back here until for 2 hours the girl had gone. When I came back, she was lying beautiful and peaceful and dead. I called the nurses and they tried to revive her. It didn't hurt. I got a message from her though. I've met Jesus. She gave me a message in my head. Yeah. From there on, she would contact me mentally. Yeah. Yeah. She'd sing middle songs like I'm the only one for you, things like that. Yeah. Well, I learned about meditation, and also I used to go to Humphrey's, the chiropractor, and he straightened me out. And with I also learned about doing Qigong, the slow movement of Qigong. Someone in July was actually used to take a group and teach it in two spots, one in Brisbane, one on the Gold Coast. So this Humphrey's chiropractor could straighten me out, and doing the Qigong, not exercise and build your muscles up, etc. This was no exercise. This was a movement, slow movement where nothing ever stops. You keep the flow like a river flowing. It doesn't stop and flow, stop and flows. That's the same movement I did with Tai Chi. That, and then I could meditate. I used to visit a friend up at Springbrook, up the mountain side. And up there in the morning, before getting out of bed, I could meditate. All that helped me. Yeah. Relaxation, no stress. That was important. Stress is, well, the thing that kills so many people. This land is full of stressful things for people. But I was lucky and I was living a stress-free life. Yeah. I think I was fortunate to stay on now, to keep going. It was funny, strange. In past lives, I was drowned on the Titanic. I can feel locked in a cabin. The water coming out of the ships, flooding my cabin, and I drowned, a most unpleasant death. So as a tiny child, as a baby, I couldn't put my head underwater. I used to get frightened and cry out to my mother as a tiny child, because with the drowning, things spin before your eyes, spin. And every night, as I started to sleep, things would spin again. I'd relive this drowning. And my poor mother used to come and try and look after me. And my father and my mother loved going to the seaside. But going to the seaside, as we got nearer and nearer, I used to get terrified. But I was all right at Sandgate, tiptoeing in the water with water up to my ankles, but nothing much deeper. And my poor mother, they had bathing boxes. You'd go up the steps into a bathing box and down the steps into water. Would take me in there, and I'd be clinging with my head, my arms and around it, locked around the neck, terrified of getting into the water. It took years and years and years. Here I was, all my mates going swimming. I'd sit on the bank and watch them. It was only years later my mother showed me how I could swim on my side. And eventually I'd swim my side and swim my back. And I'd put my head underwater. It took a long time before I could put my head underwater again, ever. But I eventually could. And eventually in the valley barbs, I could swim the width of the barb underwater. I can remember asking in this previous life, I wanted to come back here again. I wanted to live again. and I was granted this. So that's I have. Granted another life from a previous life. And I realize now, you live forever. Nobody ever dies. Your body dies, your soul moves on to the next time. And you've been here hundreds and hundreds of times, keeping going. Your soul just bounces on, just like the virus needs a human body to keep it going. Otherwise, it would die. You carry on from one body to the next body, keeping on recycling over and over and over.